Folks, Roland Martin here, broadcasting live from College Station, Texas, at Texas A&M University, where last night, white nationalist Richard Spencer was on campus speaking to a packed ballroom, but it was not the reception that he expected. He only had about a couple dozen supporters in that room, public supporters, but he was met by a throng of students as well as faculty and other folks from across the community who were not happy to see him speak on this campus. He was invited by a former student, someone who did not graduate from the university. The university could not stop his speech because as a state university, anyone can actually reserve a room to speak. But as a video we're about to show you, will show you, the protesters are out in full force. They were chanting. They were met. There was a significant security presence as well. And Spencer, once the actual speech began, he actually did what he normally does, and that is bring his white supremacist talk to this university. Here's what he had to say.
It was terrible, bloody, and violent. But we conquered this continent. Whether it's nice to say that or not, we won. And we got to define what America means. We got to define what this continent means. America, at the end of the day, belongs to white men. But perhaps our bones have to be in the ground before that will happen. Texas is a wonderful place to live. And there are a lot of the white man's bones in the ground to make that happen. White people did it. And I'm not going to ever claim that there wasn't a lot of brutality that went along with it. But we did it. Our bones are in the ground. We own it. At the end of the day, America can't exist without us. We defined it. This country does belong to white people. Culturally, politically, socially, everything. We defined what America is.
In the Q&A following his speech, he was asked about whether or not he was contributing to racial hatred in America. His response:
I am not the cause of racial divisions in the United States. To say that is to dramatically overestimate my power and to misunderstand it. The cause of this racial division, which you've alluded to, which I, of course, acknowledge, is this current paradigm that we're living in. And that current paradigm is mass immigration, multiculturalism, anti-white discrimination, and anti-white guilt. This complex that haunts everyone.
He danced around, pointed questions from two African-American students, and verbally assaulted a white man who was wearing a T-shirt who was protesting hate.
As a young black man in this country that was born here, how do you intend to make me leave?
I'm not making you leave.
So what's your plan with us?
What's your...
What are you going to do with all these people who are here? What do you intend to do with us with this white country that you want to have? So what do you intend to do?
You were a citizen. You're here.
So what is this entire conversation about then?
This entire conversation is about identitarian consciousness for white people.
And what will that incite?
Incite? What do you? It's going to incite
You're not going to give me an answer.
Politics and a new key.
Do you think that you are better than I am?
There's no ultimate object.
Are you better than me?
There is no.
Do you think that he's better than me? Is she better than me? Like,
I'll answer your question.
Are we equal?
I'll answer your question. There is no ultimate objective standard whereby I would say that this race is cosmically better than the other one.
I don't want the...
What I would say,
just go ahead and tell me
the white race is mine. It is the most important thing for me.
Right.
It is unique. You are a white coward. You wear some little T-shirt, beat the hell out of hate. Yeah, you're not even willing to do that. That T-shirt is total. You're not even willing to go to the gym. Look how fat you are. You can't beat the hell out of anything, sir. Seriously. I have to say, people say I am based on hate.
I hope this is getting on tape.
I have utter
contempt. This is free speech, everybody.
I have utter contempt for losers like you, sir. You wear a violent T-shirt. You're not even willing to actually do anything. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?
The university sponsored their own event, Aggies United, that took place at Kyle Field. Thousands were in attendance who braved the cold. It also was finals week as well. Hill Harper was the co-host of that event, along with the university student body president. V. Bozeman, Ben Rector, and others performed. I also was one of those speakers. What also was taking place while that event was going on inside of Kyle Field, you also had protesters who were outside of the Memorial Student Center where Richard Spencer spoke. I caught up with a couple of those protesters who shared their thoughts as to why they came out.
I think it's important that people realize it's not Aggies. We're in there listening to that guy. Aggies are out here trying to make sure that those people don't represent us on a national stage.
I think it's important to show that we as community and we as Aggies are taking a stand against Richard Spencer and against white nationalism.
I teach African American lit here, and I want to support my students. They make our campus a wonderful place to be, and this is what A&M is. It's the diversity of our students. That's what is special about A&M. And we are a family, but we're a diverse family. And this is not our values. So I want to come and stand with my students.
So as I said, the university had the Aggies United event. We're going to show some of that video as well right now to give you a sense of what took place inside of Kyle Field. And joining us right now to talk about this with our great panel, Tim Wise, of course, an anti-racism educator and author, joining us, of course, from Nashville, Tennessee. Also on our panel, A. Scott Bolden, an attorney and former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party. Greg Carr, the chairman of the Afro-American Studies Department at Howard University. Spencer Overton, the president of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. First and foremost, I want to go to you, Tim, and that is some people say, look, don't put these folks on TV, don't give them a platform. But the reality is, I believe we're going to see more of this. Many of us believe that Donald Trump has emboldened folks like Richard Spencer and others. He may be somebody who's of the extreme, but it's not like we have not heard this rhetoric before. What do you say the response should be from universities, from regular and ordinary people who don't agree?
Well, I think the response has to be a combination of what we saw at Texas A&M. On the one hand, people making it very clear that his words, his movement do not represent their campus and standing up against him, and also the creation of alternative events that take the focus away from white supremacists like Richard Spencer and put it on coalition building and movements for justice. So I think the combination of those two things was exactly right. I think preferably universities should be able to sit down and say, be they public or private, that just because one has a right of free speech doesn't necessarily obligate the institution to facilitate or provide facilities for the exercise of that speech. I mean, just because it is a state institution does not, in my estimation, mean, or shouldn't, maybe it does currently under law, perhaps that should be revisited in Texas and in terms of who can reserve a room, should not mean that, because I'll tell you what, I think if someone from ISIS were trying to reserve a room at A&M, I bet they'd figure out a way to stop it. I have very little doubt that they would try to stop it. Whether they would be successful under current law, I don't know. I think there are only so many days in a year, so many rooms at a college. To say that every single person who wants to speak at a college has access to that college means the college is being restricted in its right to speak as a unit to its principles and its values. That school, the state of Texas, the United States as a whole has certain principles we claim to uphold. We often don't. But the principles of equal protection, of justice under the law, those are things that this movement completely abhors and opposes. They have a right to do that. They can march, they can print pamphlets, they can have their websites. But to say that the university is duty-bound to help facilitate the replication of speech that is contrary to its values, I think is something we ought to probably be willing to revisit.
Greg Carr, what about that? Because again, let's just say you take Richard Spencer out of the equation. Let's just simply say we've seen this where folks who are right wing. I know some universities, I think DePaul University, cancel a Ben Shapiro speech and others. And so what should the response of universities be? What should the response of students be? Because again, this is not the last time we're going to hear folks like Richard Spencer say what they say on a college campus.
Yeah, I think we have, Roland, I think we have real problems when we begin to try to police the substantive dimension of speech. So, you know, let's just say that the university turned down him being able to speak at Texas A&M. Well, what happens then when someone comes from another community and someone says, oh, the Nation of Islam is coming up? In other words, I think it's a slippery slope when we do that.
Well, actually, in fact, Greg, look, I was a student here when they had the Southwestern Black Student Leadership Conference, one of the largest leadership conferences in the country. They almost invited Minister Farrakhan to speak as well. And so you're right. In fact, when Minister Farrakhan spoke at Texas Southern University leading up to the Million Man March, that was eventually canceled because of all the criticism. He spoke at a nearby church. So we've seen that even on HBCU campuses when he's been invited to speak.
In fact, especially. That's right. That's right. No, the other thing I was going to say very quickly is that, you know, I think Texas A&M played it right. I think their president wrote a remarkable letter. I think, you know, as many people have said, the answer to bad speech is more speech. So finally, you know, that is a function of the role of the press, and particularly the news media. In other words, we have to understand that this is not just normalizing. That could have been a Donald Trump rally. He was talking the way Trump has been talking at his political rallies. So the role of the press then is to not only cover things like that, but then to provide the critical counterpoint through a search for the truth. All that's First Amendment stuff, not just speaking on a college campus.
Scott, when you talk about from a legal standpoint, I mean, this is one of those issues, and so your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I was thinking the same thing as Greg, but it is a slippery slope. That's the first thing. I think there are questions, Roland, in regard to how a former student can reserve a room at Texas A&M, notwithstanding it being state-funded, and then provide a platform pursuant to the First Amendment for this type of hate speech. Whatever rules, regs, or legislative mandates or laws there are, that really needs to be revisited, because there's always a balance between First Amendment. I find it refreshing and powerful, the student's response. And maybe that's what the First Amendment is all about, that you have hate speech and then you meet it head on at every juncture, every state, every college level to push back and to build confidence in this country that while you may have hate speech, it has no place on the political center. But if you looked at that crowd, it was a biracial crowd, which was super powerful. And that same crowd needs to change the rules regarding how a former student can bring this type of speaker to Texas A&M.
Spencer.
Roland, this is a growing problem. I mean, it's not just an isolated issue. You think about the internet, and it allows these folks to kind of get together, validate each other's views, and we also see it moving into mainstream politics in terms of part of the base that elected Donald Trump here. Just part of it, but a sizable part of it, right? So we have to counter this narrative. It is growing. We also see it in Europe in terms of people who are intimidated. So we got to organize and counter. We can't just look at it as something that's fringe.
Kickstart your day at 7 and get the news you need from the perspective you want. NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.